David Langmead is born in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, Africa. He currently lives in the Karoo in a place called New Bethesda, which is a very remote area in the southeastern part of South Africa. The closest town to David is about a mile, and the closest city, about an hour away, sorry, and the closest city to David Langmead is about 3 hours away. David Langmead studied art at the University of Pretoria in South Africa and afterwards became an art teacher. In the 90s, he became one of the most sought-after landscape painters in the South African art market, and it was only in the early 2000s that David decided that he wanted to paint wildlife into his beautiful landscape scenes. The feat, although it sounded easy, was a challenge to David because, as he said afterwards, there was a challenge in creating the design element for the animals to go into the paintings that he was unaware of prior to creating such works of art. David gets all his reference material from his travels around the countries of southern Africa. He visits these natural habitats to photograph the fauna, flora, and animals that exist in those environments. While accumulating such reference materials, he particularly takes notice of things like bark on the trees, mud formations, river lines, and things that he can include in his paintings that make them the authentic paintings that you see in his works today. I think that one can agree that in order to be a great wildlife artist or landscape artist, one really needs to live and breathe that environment all the time, which David Langmead does. Many people ask, well, are these images painted from a photograph? Well, absolutely, of course they are. One has to understand that it would be tantamount to asking a figurative artist to paint a model without having the model in front of them or a photograph. Obviously, we can't ask a leopard in the middle of the bush to pose for us and get into certain positions as the luxury of figurative artists have. So the challenge for painters like David Langmead is to get the great reference shots that are paramount to creating great wildlife paintings. The challenges of working in these types of environments are very, very high. One has to realize that in the past we have lost wildlife painters to being killed by some of the wild animals out there. Some people may know that Simon Coombs was killed a few years ago by a buffalo in Kenya. So the dangers and hardships of being out in the African bush are very evident all the time. Today, David Langmead is considered one of the premier artists in the world. In fact, we consider him in the top 10 wildlife painters living in the world today. His works have been published and featured in many magazines, including Wildlife Art, Sporting Classics, Wildlife Art Journal, The Art of Big Game Hunting, African Sporting Gazette, just to name a few. His works have also been shown at the Lee Yorkie Woodson Art Museum, and some of his works have traveled around the country and been shown at many, many museums within the United States. His collectors exist all over the world, whether they be in Europe, the Far East, Australia, Central South America, or North America itself. David Langmead is married, he has 3 children, and he still resides in South Africa, where he continues to paint every single day from outside of his window, where he can see the beautiful and majestic scenes that encompass Africa. Okay. All right.